Hello, this is David. I wanted to make a very quick video talking about how to rebalance nature while we continue to do what we do as humanity, rather than trying to change what we do, which is what most people are trying to get us to do. Like, for example, if you look at what the solutions are for carbon dioxide poisoning in the air, or excessive carbon dioxide in the cities, what do we have? We have organizations that are lobbying the government, like Greenpeace is what Greenpeace used to do when I worked for Greenpeace, and they're lobbying the government to create a carbon tax. And a carbon tax is not actually going to solve the problem of the carbon emissions. This is backwards thinking, because we're trying to force humanity to do something that is against humans' nature. And a carbon tax could actually result, for example, in a tax on breathing. This is not a good idea. Right. And it's a better idea to do things in a little bit of a different way. Let me give you a few examples of how you can rebalance nature with very simple things. Okay. Number one, we're always focused on how much fish we're taking out of the sea, how many resources we're taking out of the sea, and things of the nature. This is what humanity is focused on when they think about fishing. They think about overfishing. Actually, fundamentally, it's a problem with prosperity thinking. I think that everybody would agree with that. So prosperity thinking would say that there's never a lack of resources. There's just limitations on how we've come up with, as of this moment, to utilize the resources that we've got. And if we reutilize the resources that we've got in a new way, then we can do things that are going to work. So how could you do that, for example, with the fish? Well, rather than focusing on how much fish we're taking out of the sea, what we do instead is we focus on how can we put in like 3 times as much surviving fish out of whatever we figure out a way to put in, whether it's from eggs or whether it's from a different way of doing things. For example, how could we put in 3 times as much fish as the fish we take out? So as we fish, we are actually replenishing the oceans, right? And that's not against human nature, because that could be something that could actually create a lot of good business in private industry, things like this, right? Because this should be taxed by the government but managed by the people is the way that this should be. So, for example, all you have to do is you put a little bit of, you take the excise tax, for example, off those purchases, same tax, right? But this time, people are purchasing fish, for example. So you take the excise tax on the fish, and the excise tax for the fish goes towards replenishing that part of the environment. Same thing we would do with all sorts of different things in nature. Another example would be, houses. The excise tax would say all purchases would be taxed at 10%. It would be a flat tax on everything. In exchange, there's obviously no income tax. So, for example, there's problems that we create by cutting down and cutting down and cutting down and cutting down and never replenishing the environment, right? But human beings are not going to stop doing this. We at least not right now. I could probably get humanity to rest from things in cycles and periods together, with all of you working together to do it. But the reality is that we need to realize that people are people, and that people are going to do what they're going to do. So, for example, how many trees get cut down for a house on average, right? Or you say, not on average, you say this specific house uses this specific amount of wood. That's actually the way that it should be, right? So this house, the wood is weighed, for example, for the house. So, for example, as people are building it, they've got to weigh all the wood that they use, or in the construction materials, how much wood did they purchase? That would probably be an easier way, because that's, for example, the excise tax or something like that. And then what we do is we say, okay, this house used 20 trees in its construction or something like that, right? And so, well, what would we need to do then? Then we would need to figure out a way to replenish the nature with 3 times that many trees, okay? So, for example, we plant 3 times that many trees, because not all of them are going to survive, you know what I mean? Nature's nature. And then society gets tasked with planting those trees. However, it comes from the excise tax, and when people plant the trees, they actually earn a little bit of the excise tax. So people can actually earn money from the tax that comes from these houses by participating as a society in going out and replenishing the environment. And this is a way where we reward people for their nature, and we allow them to do what they love to do, which is make money while they're doing something that's actually going to make sure that the world is still here in 1,000 years or in 1,000,000 years or in 10 million years. So, for example, you have one house, it'll say it uses 10 trees. Well, then 30 trees get planted, okay, or something like that. Now, we could have some mathematicians and some scientists and stuff like this figure this out, right? And you could do the same thing with every part of nature. For example, I don't think there should be laws that say houses should only blend in with the nature. This is what St. George, Utah does. St. George, Utah makes it to where the houses in the construction, they've got to blend in with nature. I actually think that we should set checks and balances in place that make it to where, in order to build a house, it actually has to add to nature, right? Like, it actually has to add to nature in some way. And that could be done by the local government and the local people. And then all this does is it makes the architects and things like this get a little bit more creative with how they build houses. And they do it in a way where the houses are built, and I'm not an architect, and so I'd have to talk to them about this and come up with ideas for this. The house gets built in a way where you cannot actually build a house without adding to nature. And then all of a sudden, does it really hurt nature if we build more houses? Actually, no, it doesn't. Because we're actually adding to nature. We're adding more trees than we take out. We're adding more animals and stuff like that. For if an environment is disrupted, we just we add this. We breed animals and we send them back out. And these sections of the world, we cover everything, right? So the reality is that, like, if we did things like that, and we're like, no, you can't build unless it adds to nature, right? Now all of a sudden, people are totally thinking in a different, more harmonious way. And you say, well, that would interrupt a lot of the modern building. No. All it would do was get them to change how they're actually doing the modern building. We're not saying for people to build less. We're not saying them. In this case, actually, it would be positive for the environment to build more, perhaps, because we could figure out a way to do that, right? We could figure out a way where human beings are supposed to add to the environment. This is actually our God-given assignment to have dominion over the earth, over the fish of the sea, over the plants and over the shrubs and over everything that moveth. We're supposed to have dominion over this. And dominion doesn't mean we crush everything out of existence. Dominion means that we make it even better than God left it there, right? You say, well, that's some work. Well, yeah, we can do that because we're humans and this is our task. And so my point is that there's a different way of thinking about everything, okay? I'm going to keep this video very short because I got to work on my system. Okay, you can go to thekingdomofeloheim.org if you like these kind of philosophies and you like what you're hearing. And, I'll talk about that later in a future video. But if we do things like this is a way of acting and behaving that creates positive karma for the environment, right? We should always be thinking as we're taking actions, as we're going out there and we're giving value, as we're building relationships, as we're learning people's names and we're learning about the people in our target market, and we're connecting with them through email, and we're connecting with them through videos, and we're connecting with them through audios, and we're connecting with them through culture, and we're connecting with them through meetings and all this stuff. We should always be thinking about all this while we're doing it. We should be thinking about how can we make our environment better than where we found it. Actually, my dad taught me that. He said when we'd go camping, his mission was always not to make it just like he found it, to make it better than he found it. That was actually what my dad taught me to do, which I actually have not been good at. I think majority of my life I've not been good at that in certain things. Like, for example, I make too much mess still and things like this. This would be an example of mess would be negative karma. Positive karma would be making it very clean, right? That would be positive karma. Positive karma would be planting trees. Negative karma would be cutting down trees, right? So there's always going to be negative karma for cutting down trees. So how do you rebalance it? Well, we got people, and we need to provide housing and shelter and things like this for people. So we can't tell people that you can't cut down trees, or we could do things in a different way. Perhaps we could build houses of bricks. Perhaps we could build houses that have straw bricks or whatever, or that are just made from modern bricks, or we made them from rocks. And in this case, the house is probably more sturdy. And probably less prone to being burned down by fire, and the construction time might go up, but then we got to take rocks out of the ground too. So there's always a balance, but it's less karma to take rocks out of the ground, for example, than to just cut down trees. However, if you rebalance the karma from the cutting down of the trees by just simply planting more trees, we've balanced it out. One of the enlightened leaders that I follow is a guy named Sadhguru, You look him up on YouTube. He's fantastic. He's got this great. That's why one of the reasons I started growing a beard is because I liked his beard so much. And so, I follow this guy and I watch his videos. I don't know, like not every day. I should probably watch them every day. They're the most fantastic videos I've ever seen from enlightened teachers. They're great. They're fantastic enlightened videos from Sadhguru on prosperity and abundance and all the things that people talk about. And one of the things he keeps score of is how many trees his organization plants. He actually keeps track of how many trees his organization plants, because this is resetting positive karma. And the goal, obviously, in an organization would be to plant more trees than that organization uses in their resources. Now, obviously, this is a really time-based strategy. So over a period of 100 years, right, this will actually replenish the wildlife that people are destroying to a great degree. Okay. Now, if we all did it as a society, it would actually replenish it probably in about 100 years, right? We could probably replenish all of the nature that we've destroyed as a species in 100 years by simply focusing on giving back more to the environment than we take. So we still take. It's not about not taking. It's about we give back more than we take. And because we give back more than we take, there's the environment there for the future generations. For example, in Hawaii, you used to be able to throw a net out, and the whole thing would come back just full of fish, or the whole thing, right? And you can't do that today, right? Well, we could actually create that in the oceans by figuring out how to get people to put more fish in the oceans than they take out. And then all of a sudden we get the oceans replenished. And then all of a sudden we go out in the oceans and we say, this is negative karma. This is not going to help us as humanity. We have this giant city-sized or state or country-sized thing of plastic in the ocean right now, right? So we need to figure out a way, you say maybe there's some sort of chemical that would break that down that's biological that wouldn't hurt the animals. We could do it like that. Maybe we need to just get that out of the ocean and then recycle the plastic. I mean, we can't just leave that there and think that it's not a responsibility because nobody owns the oceans, right? This is the backwards way that the world thinks about things. Oh, it's not my responsibility to clean that out because nobody owns the oceans. Yeah, they do. We all do. Okay. And so if we clean that thing out, that's an example of creating massive positive karma. And then we say, well, how can we replenish the coral reef? New coral reef is growing all over the ocean, right? Now, how can we replenish the coral reef? How can we replenish the fish? How can we replenish the supply of the different things that we are taking out of the ocean? If we think like that, and if we think in the positive terms of how we can give more as a society than we take out, then all of a sudden, all these backwards problems that exist that people are ignoring because they don't think they're going to be alive, they actually replenish. The earth replenishes itself over a period of 100 years or something like that. Another thing we could do to replenish the environment is get society to rest from eating meat for a year. Find some way of taking care of the farmers or whatever that are important to society, or maybe they could just sell the animals. You know what I mean? That's another thing that farmers could do with those animals. They don't have to cut them up into meat. They could sell them, right? They could sell the animals. But you have this giant society of just consume. So if we as a society said, okay, we're just going to rest from eating meat, we can do it for 12 months. I mean, we'll eat eggs instead. We'll make sure that we're, covered in protein and whatever. Let's get society to rest from meat eating for a year. I'm telling you, that would do wonders for restoring natural wildlife and the abundance of different animal species on the earth, just resting. And if you have fat farming replaced with decentralized farming system would be the whole community participates in the slaughter process, and then they still go to a meat house or whatever where they cut up the meat or something. But here's the thing: if society can't man up and slaughter the animals they eat, and they could get paid for that process too, some sort of commission or something like that. Something like that would make sure, for example, decentralized farming system where everybody just participates in the raising of livestock or something like that. If society can't slaughter the animals they eat, they should stop eating them. If they're too chicken, you know what I mean? This is backwards thinking, right? Somebody else take care of us. We never have to see this process, and we're just going to eat this diseased meat that everybody has. We don't need to do that. A decentralized farming system would actually solve this problem because we decentralize it. We get the people participating in the farming system because farming is very important, right? And we should not depend on farmers, just like the States shouldn't depend on Iran for the dollar. Human beings shouldn't depend on farmers only for food. And this is the way we do it right now. What would happen if something happened to the farmers? None of us even know how to grow food, right? How backwards is this thinking? None of us even understand how do we grow food. Nobody gets it. Nobody knows how to do it, right? Nobody knows how to like plant gardens. Nobody knows how to in modern society. Nobody knows how to grow plants. They can figure it out real quick. But my point is that we're very dependent on the central farming system, and this is why the central farming system exists. It exists because we're dependent on it. Because over a period of 100 years or something, we think that selling things and owning shops and running around in our cars and fancy society is more important than planting the food. And actually, no, it's not, because without the food, none of that stuff exists. Wouldn't you agree with that? Right? So we all participate in the food process. We all participate in the growing process. We all participate, and not because we have to, not because the government makes you. We do it through influence, right? But the central farming system has to go. Has to go. I won't allow that to stay. I promise. If I'm president of the United States, I won't allow that thing to stay by the end of 4 years. We have to come up with something. It's got to be utterly eliminated, right? And so the point is, because I don't want that karma catching up on society. And that's what the central bankers want. Maybe they don't want that, but they said the karma for that would be concentration camps. We don't want that. That's what karma. There's spaces for concentration camps all over North America. People ignore these things. Look at what Alex Jones has a lot of information about it. A lot of people have information about it. There's like these empty concentration camps all over North America. And replace it. Okay? We do that, and then what happens? We get richer, wealthier. The diseases get eradicated from the land. I was actually just reading the Torah today in Exodus. I can't remember, maybe around the 20th chapter. So no, I don't think that far. But I was reading it anyways. I was reading it. And, because I spent about half an hour to an hour reading it. Yeah, that's the promise of treating animals well. That's the promise of planting trees and gardens and getting everybody involved in the farming process. This is the promise of rebalanced society. Another thing is the backwards way that we do like sewage. Okay. I actually think the problem in itself with sewage is that we're dependent on who society puts in there to deal with it, right? I think that in the ancient societies, probably what they did, and I know that some of them did this because I could remember this, but not all of them did it, is they would probably have like little private areas that were closed off or things like this, and people would just like dig a hole in the ground, poop in it, and cover it back up. You know what I mean? And then they'd plant, they would do that for a while in an area. And then what they'd do is they would plant a garden there or something like that. Right? Now, all of a sudden, it's like this issue of overclogging the world with sewage doesn't even exist under that system, does it? You're built to poop when you squat. You know what I mean? But we do this thing where we need a toilet and we need toilet paper, because they used to just use leaves for that. You know what I mean? They'd like have leaves. They'd use that. They'd wash their hands, and then they would put the leaves in the poop. And probably that combination would do some of the things that I've talked about with healing diseases with leaves, where when you plant something on top of it, probably what would happen is the leaves that get planted on top of sewage would probably heal the diseases that exist in that sewage. You know what I mean? And I've talked about this a lot because I believe that there's a lot of ways to heal diseases that are very simple because the leaves of the tree are for the healing of nations. Now, some of that you'd need scientific studies, but I really don't think they need that much scientific studies. I just think I think that we do that to prove it, but I think people just need to rebalance themselves with nature, and a lot of diseases are just going to go away as long as people are eating the leaves of the trees and stuff like that and reintegrating nature into their biology, right? So now all of a sudden people are thinking about what they're doing, right? Rather than just doing it. We got this backward society where everybody just things like, for example, we go into a bathroom, we take a dump, right? And then we hope it goes away. And it does go away, right? It does. It goes down to the toilet where then we have to wait for somebody else who's not us to deal with our mess. And we forget about it. and think it doesn't matter. It matters. It matters. Map that out over a million years, and the whole world's covered in poop. I mean, we can't keep doing this crap. That was funny. That we're doing and expect nothing negative to happen from it. Right? You got to map everything we're doing as a society over a million years. And what do we got? We got a world that isn't even a world anymore. That doesn't even have an atmosphere anymore. Not things everybody are doing, because there's many people that are balanced and harmonious with the environment. But I promise Gabriel Cousins, for example, out at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center, recycles everything. He's got systems for it. This is what enlightened people do. They figure it out. This is it. I got to go work on my system. Did this help you understand how to rebalance nature while continuing to do what we do? Now, some of this I'm talking about things of changing what we do. But the idea of just taking a percentage of the excise tax or whatever on certain purchases and just dedicate it towards making that area sustainable is actually a very good and simple idea, right? It would need a very advanced technological system to keep track of the taxes and the purchases and what was purchased and stuff like that. And it would need coordination with businesses to make sure that information was in some sort of barcode that got transferred to, what's up, Ewan? Thank you, man. They get, to get transferred over to the proper government body. And then what the government would do with the excise tax is we would have the resources, and then we would give those resources to the people, and the people would be responsible for carrying them out. So we don't have to have like this just giant, never ending pile of employees, and they would earn some sort of commission or something like that when they did it. And maybe it would be a very small commission. I mean, if you're talking about something like somebody, off of, something small purchases, or maybe if they developed a system for it, they could earn a large commission, So the point is with this is all part of the only government approved money getting system is you get people to do what they want. And while they're doing what we want, we rebalance the environment, right? Rather than depending on some big dumb government to do it, we do it all together. Right. And now all of a sudden we're thinking about the future in a prosperous way. We're prospering as a society at a totally new level because we're giving more than we're receiving. That makes sense? There's a thing in one of the books in the New Testament. I can't remember. I think Paul wrote it, but I'm not sure. It's where he says it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And a lot of people, they look at that wrong and they're like, no, it's not. I like receiving. Well, there's nothing wrong with receiving. However, when you give, you're receiving massively compounds. Do you get that? That's what that means. It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. Because when you give, you're receiving compounds. That's what we got to do as a society. That's what we got to do to the environment. That's what we got to do direct. Anyways, I'm done.